Hello and welcome back to the Tenaciously Resolute podcast. I hope that you have been enjoying the past episodes, and today we also have a wonderful episode planned for you. So today with me, we have the wonderful, the amazing, the superstar, the champion in the world of domestic violence, Ms Onika Mars, CEO of Women of Substance NPO. Hi, Onika, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Carice. Thank you so much for having me.
It is always a pleasure to see you. Onika is my good friend. I've known her for a while, and it is such an honor to have her here with us because she has been doing such an amazing work, not just locally, but internationally. Onika, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you became a champion in the field of domestic violence.
Okay, a little bit about myself. I am a very fun-loving person, very compassionate. I love people. I love to serve because I understand that service to humanity is service unto God. I love traveling. For me, that is my therapy. Yeah?
Yeah. Well, I mean, everyone loves that little getaway, because at the end of the day, the world is here to be explored,
Definitely.
So, Onika, I know that you have a quite colorful past, and in that past, it would have led you up to this point of championing domestic violence as your passion project. Tell us a little bit about that and the reasoning why you have decided to pick up the mantle.
Okay, so, Carice, I am a survivor of intimate partner violence, which is a subset of gender-based violence. And I want to be the change that I want to see. I decided that I will be that change. I decided that coming out of that situation and looking back at my angry self back then, recognized that there were gaps. I recognized that I never knew of support systems. My support systems were friends and a few family members because, of course, I was ashamed while going through my experience. So looking back, I thought, you know what, let me champion that cause because I also saw myself as the generational curse breaker in my family.
So wait, is this a pattern that you would have recognized in your family? Are you the only one that would have been abused?
No, and I prefer if we say, experienced intimate partner violence, I would not have been the only one. I could safely share that my grandmother, I remember when my grandmother died a couple of years ago, I wanted to find out why my grandmother moved from Tobago to Trinidad, right? And it was the day after her death, and I just wanted to know. I was very, very curious.
Yeah.
And I reached out to my aunt, one of my aunts, my dad's sister, to find out, why mommy moved from Tobago to Trinidad, and the reasoning behind that would have been that whenever I had an experience like a physical assault or a fight with my partner, I would run to my grandmother's house in Sawa for rescue. Yeah. So that would have been my safe space at that time. And, over and over, my grandmother would say to me, Onika, continue to pray. Continue to pray. Everything is going to be all right. Now, I always heard bits and pieces of my grandmother being a victim of abuse. But what was funny was that my grandmother never mentioned any of her experiences. So I asked my aunt, why did my grandmother leave Tobago? And my aunt then told me that my grandmother ran away from an abusive husband, an abusive relationship in Tobago. Carice, that broke me. And the reason why it broke me was because I too ran away from an abusive relationship in Trinidad. So it was like, okay, my grandmother ran away from Tobago. I ran away from Trinidad.
Circle moment.
Definitely. So then I was like, okay, immediately, I was like, okay, the buck stops with me.
Yes.
Yeah, I will be that person that breaks the generational curse, because I knew that it was a generational curse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In psychology, there's this tool called a genogram where they often trace the family lines to see what are some of the patterns that they could pick up. I know in Christianity we say, a generational curse. But often when you start asking questions about what happened to mommy and what happened to tanty and what happened to my cousin, you start realizing there are some patterns here and things that follow throughout the family. And it's amazing that you would have referenced your grandmother, because oftentimes we don't have the ability to do that type of introspection and look back and see what happened then that is affecting now.
Right, because a lot of times we have experiences, and because we don't have the information of the past, we cannot attach our present experiences to things that would have occurred in the past. So one of the things that really hurt was the fact that my grandmother went through that experience. And I had to go through the same experience. So I felt like, why didn't my grandmother tell me during those visits that she also was a victim? But then I know that the older heads, they tend to keep things to themselves.
Yeah, I think back then it was the silent generation, and they often did not disclose, and I really do feel like that was a serious disservice to the generations after. I mean, the contributions are to be valued, but then when you have no clue what would have caused them to behave in the way that they do, or they would have chosen to behave, you really lack the context to embrace the situation for what it is.
Definitely.
So I'm wondering, what was the breaking point? What was the low point? What was the straw that would have broke the camel's back when you decided, me, I want to get out of this?
Okay, so my partner and I lived in Trinidad, and we, coming out of that relationship, I had 2 children. I birthed 2 children, and after my first son, yes, there was abuse in the relationship. There was infidelity also, because I would also take the opportunity to share, right, that my children were born in the US, right? Yeah. So when my first son was 5 weeks old, I think, or about 2 months, we came back to Trinidad and Tobago, right? To Trinidad, because we were living I resided in Trinidad back then. And I remember the night of our return, his father receiving a phone call at midnight. And it was a call from someone who I often asked him about, right? Because that person would always call. I was always suspicious. I always had that gut feeling. And women, we have that gut feeling. And he always denied.
Yeah.
Right? And I remember that passed. A couple nights after, in that very week of my return, I dreamt I was holding 2 children in my hands. One was brown, one was dark. So one was darker than the other.
Okay.
And they were very long. Yeah? So like long children, right? Long babies.
Yeah.
So I was like, 2 babies? Why? What kind of dream is this?
God, yeah.
So I shared this dream with my then children's father, and he was like, forget that, you're probably pregnant again. And I was like, how can I be pregnant again? I've only been back 1 week, not even, So my very first Mother's Day, Carice, my son was about to be 4 months old, right? So my very first Mother's Day, the Saturday before Mother's Day, I found out that my son had a sister born on the same day with him.
Wow.
So could you imagine how traumatic that was?
I am trying to imagine it, and at this point, it is a lot to even take in.
Definitely. So that was something. And I think our relationship went further downhill. Yeah, because of course, I've been asking about this young lady you've been denying, and
the long baby dream.
Right.
Look at how accurate. Sometimes we as women, we try to turn down the noise of our intuition, and it's always accurate.
Yeah, 99.9%.
Yes. We have good stats out here, ladies. Trust your intuition.
Definitely. So that was that. The abuse continued, verbal abuse, physical abuse, and I remember I got pregnant with my second son, and my first son was like 9 months old, and I was in a mess because there was no plan to have a second child. I mean, coming out of that mess, like, I have one child. I'm happy that I have my son, and I didn't have any thoughts of having a second child. And here it is, I'm pregnant. What do I do?
Ooh, yeah.
And I'm talking to my then neighbor, and she's like, well, you're pregnant, embrace your pregnancy. God doesn't do anything. He
doesn't make mistakes.
He doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah.
God, these children, they will grow with each other.
And
so I heard the full works, and I was like, okay, here we go. I'm pregnant again, and I have to tell my parents. I have to tell family members, and I did tell my parents, and I carried the pregnancy pretty well with the support from my parents, and I went back to the States to have my second son. Yeah, and the relationship, it was already shaky, so
it shook even more.
Definitely, and there was no trust. So I returned after giving birth to my second son. So I'm now in the household with 2 children, 2 babies. And that in itself was a bit frustrating because, it is 2 babies. Yeah, and it was stressful.
Of course, that's the time you need the support.
Definitely. And the fact that he was unfaithful, not only was he unfaithful, a child
was born from it.
Definitely. So it was a reminder, it is a reminder for me that every time my son celebrates his birthday, his sister is also celebrating her birthday. So even if I wanted to place that memory
in the back
of my mind, there is no way I could have. So, as I said, the abuse continued. There was physical abuse, there was verbal abuse, there was sexual abuse, and it continued. At that time, I worked at Tech, State Police. And I remember my partner coming to the office where I worked and reported to my sergeant, who was a male, that I threatened to shoot him. I was a precepted officer, right? And I was in shock. And what was very painful for me was the fact that my supervisor did not ask me any questions. What he
Seriously?
did was to call me in after my children's father left. And he asked me for my pocket diary. And I was on sentry on that day.
Yeah.
And he also told me to bring the station diary. Chris, in my pocket diary and in the station diary, that sergeant wrote that Mars is not to be issued with a weapon to leave the compound. So it means that when I am booked on a patrol, an external patrol, I will be the only officer who is unarmed.
Yeah.
And that was painful because I felt like, I am the one who is working
didn't
with
he
you.
ask you questions?
No
Didn't
questions.
He, somewhat try to do some investigations? Or...
Nothing.
Wow.
Nothing. He just wrote in the station diary and the...
So that was the final say on the matter?
Definitely. There were no investigations.
Wow.
So it means that he believed everything my children's father said to him. Yeah, and that caused me to be very angry, very hurt, very disappointed because I felt like, okay, you are my supervisor. You don't know anything about my children's father. Why would you just believe him?
And it warrants at least a conversation.
Which was never had. And I was like, okay, so if I am going to be booked for a patrol, an external patrol, and I would be the only officer that would be unarmed, it means that I am going to say to them that I feel uncomfortable going out on a patrol without being armed. Fast forward to me asking him to leave because things were getting worse.
Also, you were responsible for having the apartment or the home?
Okay, so we lived in my house because before Tech I worked at HDC, right? So we lived in my house, which wasn't an issue. I didn't see it as an issue. And I had to ask him to leave because it was just too much. I experienced stalking. I would work the...
Post leaving?
Yes. I would experience, I would work the 6 to 2 shift, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. and 2 to 10, 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. Chris, there are times that when I leave work, I would have to ask the officers to accompany me just because I'm fearful.
Living in fear.
Right? And eventually I thought that, you know what? I don't want to live like a prisoner. Yeah, and I thought that enough was enough. And I would be honest with you, Carice, looking back, I don't know, I just made some decisions because I didn't have much information related to intimate partner violence and how you manage. I knew nothing about safety planning.
I'd like to ask you a question. How old were you at the time? Because, sometimes with youth, people might say, your prefrontal cortex isn't developed yet. And, or was it a matter of youth or was it just a matter of this was my life at that age?
So I was in my 30s. Next month is going to be 16 years since we moved to Tobago, my children and I. I was in my 30s. I think I was in my 30s, yes. Yeah, and I just thought I needed to just do what I have to do. So it took me talking. I remember I spoke to a police officer and he was like, okay, you need to do X, you need to do Y, you need to secure yourself. But I didn't know anything about safety planning or anything. And that is why I mentioned that I didn't know of any support systems, right? So I asked him to leave. Did he leave quietly? No, he didn't. It was a big hoorah, a lot of embarrassment and all that. Upon leaving, my neighbor would tell me that he would be parked in cars like, you know, where it was 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
So he's parked in front of the house, you know, like scoping to see if anybody is coming, right? Any man is coming,
Wow.
you know.
So this is a serious case of stalking. This is
Yes,
not just, you know, a pass by 1 day, 2 days. This was consistent.
No, it was consistent. And what he also did was he worked with a well-established organization in a managerial position, and he would use unmarked vehicles to pass by my workplace. So, of course, it was scary, right? And prior to that, he would always threaten me that anytime I leave, nobody else will have me. Nobody else, right? And I remember one morning, right, he developed a habit where, well, of course, he was unfaithful, right? And he would come in, Curry's 2 o'clock every morning. And one morning he came in at 2, and I told him, I said, you know what, this is it. That was prior to me asking him eventually to leave.
Yeah.
And, you know, he was like, he said, this is it, right? And I think I said, well, okay, you know, because I am thinking,
have agreed.
Yes,
Yeah.
you know, because I am thinking, okay, he's living in my house. He probably recognized that the relationship
It's going
downhill. So, you know, this is it. To me, meant, well, okay, you go back to your house. I stay in my house with the children, our children. And I, back then, said to him, okay, I understand that we really cannot make it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the relationship cannot work. So what I would do is I will be happy when everything calms down to make arrangements so that you would see, you know, you'll be able to visit the children, and, you know, I would never keep the children away from you.
Yeah.
And Carice, this man turned to me and he said, what arrangements you talking about? Arrangements? Your mother and they will come from Tobago and find everybody body parts scattered in this house. And by the time the police arrive, they will not find me alive.
Find you alive?
They will not find, well, he's saying to me, they will not find him alive. So they will not
it would have been a suicide and murder.
Definitely.
Oh gosh, girl.
Definitely.
Wow.
So at that moment,
you realize you more than in big trouble. You in danger.
So I'm like, okay. And I started praying silently, because what immediately came to mind was my grandmother, who once said to me, when I was a little child, she would say to me, your mouth very hot, but if it's one thing you could pray. Because, I mean, we used to have to go to church, have to go to Sunday school growing up, you know. So then I started to pray silently. And I was like, God, you need to deliver me from this situation. God, I am not ready to die. God, my children are babies, you know. I was just talking to God. And I remember saying to him, God, my promise to you is, once you deliver me alive, deliver my children alive, God, I promise you that I will serve you with everything within me. And I knew God answered, because here I am.
Yeah.
I knew God answered.
Flesh.
Definitely. I knew God answered because God allowed him to call his sister. And mind you, it was like about after 2 a.m, right? Because remember I said he would come home 2 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
And he called his sister. Now, Carice, who answers their phone 2 o'clock in the morning?
That is unusual favor, eh?
Right. Mm-hmm. And his sister answered her phone. And they spoke. He told her what he was going to do. And she was there pleading with him. This I found out after. And she kept him on the phone until like about a little after 6 a.m., which was day clean.
Yeah.
And Carice, I know it was God. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know it was God. So for me, I felt like God kept his end of the bargain.
Absolutely.
So
he did.
I now have to keep mine.
Yours.
Right? So coming out of that, I said, you know what? Eventually, I need to go because this man is going to kill me, because he mentioned it on several occasions. And I know it was him injecting fear, but for me, it was a threat. And I felt like, you know what? I don't know if I sleeping with my enemy.
You don't know at this point. You didn't figure it out as yet.
Well,
sure?
At that time, I'm like, okay, because I mean, this is somebody who I was deeply in love with. Yeah. And Carice, I felt like I needed to make a move. As I said, I never knew anything about safety planning. My parents didn't know a lot about what was happening because I was too ashamed to mention stuff to them. My mom suspected, my dad suspected, but we never had the conversations. I remember my mom telling me once that there was a murder in Malabar, because we lived in Malabar, right? There was a murder in Malabar. A woman was murdered by her partner. And she said after that murder, every night she would take her phone off of the hook, like 9-10 p.m. And because her fear was that somebody would call her one day to tell her that something happened to me.
Oh my God. So Onika, after experiencing all of this, and you would have subsequently left Trinidad, coming to Tobago, did the stalking stop? How was the relations between the two of you all? And what did you do as your next set of plans?
Okay, so I actually ran away from Trinidad, right? So because, of course, I couldn't let him know that I was leaving, because what I know now is that is the most dangerous part of the time of the relationship. Because abuse is about power and control.
Absolutely,
so once your partner recognizes that they are losing power and, control in the relationship, they become very, very angry. So I applied for a transfer. I remember first I applied for a restraining order, a protection order, And I remember going to my then CEO. He was the chief of security back then. That was Mr. Cedric Neptune, right? And I went to him that day when I left court. No, I went to him before, and I told him I was going to apply for the protection order. And he said to me, I gave him a little bit of what was happening. And I told him, I said, I need to go back home. I need to go back home. And he said, okay, bring the information, the protection order. I'll bring a copy of it. And, we will take it from there. And I thank God for using him in the process, right? Because there and then I got my transfer to Tobago, right? And it was not an easy period, an easy time, because, of course, I uprooted the children from school. I uprooted from my job, my space, my home that I knew, my home that I built, as a young single woman.
So you just had to let go of that investment for the purpose of living your own life
and my children's
and
life,
your
definitely.
Children's life.
Yes, so I saw survival. I saw survival.
The thing about it, a lot of people feel as though they can't let go of the material things to secure their life. I mean, because there's always a time span that you could tell that I am in big danger. I suppose. Was it like that for you?
Yeah, I felt like I was in danger because he would call, he would threaten all the time, and he would inject fear. I remember him saying to me once, People taking small money to kill people now.
Oh good, girl, oh good. Oh good.
I could be out of the country and something happened to you and nobody would even think that it is me. So hearing things like those, I was like, I need to make a move.
So how did something like that, those type of statements, empower you into action at the Women of Substance NPO? How do you look at those type of things now?
Well, I look at those situations as situations where you need to make a move, like an immediate move. And
because it's crisis.
It's action, definitely.
Yeah.
And this is why, Carissa, a lot of people say that I'm very passionate about what I do. I am indeed passionate because I've been there. I know what it is to be physically assaulted at 1 a.m. And there's nobody to... Well, not that there's nobody to call, but
No immediate help.
No immediate help.
Yeah.
I have one of my cousins, Dr. Wendell Wallace, right? He's a lecturer at UE and attorney. He was the person I would call sometimes 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And we laugh about it now because, I would call and I would be like, cuz you're sleeping? And he would be like, no, I'm up. And when we laugh at it now, he would be like, Onika, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, you don't expect me to be sleeping, but he said he knew what I was going through.
Yeah.
So he felt like he needed to be there to support me, to hear me out. So he said, I decided that I would never tell you that, I was sleeping, right? And
he was your support system at the time.
Definitely.
All right. So I want you to tell me a little bit of what you do at your NPO. Tell me what it is, who is it set up for, and how can they access that program if you are also a survivor or in currently a position where you are being abused violently.
All right. I would want to mention before I say, what we offer, that my experience would have led me to to birth Women of Substance. And I see it as pain, purpose being birthed out of pain, right? And I also, because of my experience, of course, I made a commitment to Christ. And
of course you did.
Right.
And he held up his part,
Definitely.
Gentle reminder.
Yes. And, I say, Lord, listen, I am going all out for you. Right. And Women of Substance was birthed in 2017. Unofficially 2016, because the Holy Spirit led me to birth a support group, a domestic violence support group for victims and survivors of intimate partner violence. And coming out of the support group, Women of Substance nonprofit organization was birthed. And we offer support to persons affected by domestic violence and abuse, intimate partner violence. Support in terms of foodstuff when we receive donations of foodstuff. Clothing because we depend on donations from friends and family and members of the public. We do awareness programs. We offer workshops, empowerment workshops for the women, because what I know is that a lot of women stay in abusive relationships because
they're financially abused.
Definitely, and they are fully dependent upon their partner. There are women who, because they are unemployed, their partner will have them total control. Total control, and they are not allowed to work. They are not allowed to accept any help from family members or friends. So what we want to do is empower these women.
So I have a question, because I know you're speaking about empowerment, right? But when you come from a position where you're entrapped within a space, now being given freedom, now being given access, how do people react to that? How are they accept it? How are they afraid? I want you to kind of reflect on that.
Well, some accept and some, of course, are afraid because we've had clients who went back to the abusive relationship because, of course, it is your comfort zone. It is what you know. You've become comfortable in that space. Not that you, as a victim, like the abuse or enjoy the abuse, but it is what you know. So you've become accustomed to it. Okay?
Yeah, I
And
think that there's a reference to that Guillain-Barré syndrome where persons are so used to the abuse. It's almost like your mind is only centered on being in that space. You can't see life outside of being abused. The thought of even leaving is not even something that you could even conceptualize. Have you met up with people that would have been in that type of?
yes, definitely. We've had clients who we referred to safe houses and they went back to their abusers. And this is something that, the ordinary mind cannot perceive. Right. And people on the outside would say, or people who have never experienced abuse would say, why doesn't she just leave? She liked the licks. She loved the abuse. It is not that they love the abuse. It is not that, they enjoy the abuse. I mean, definitely. But it is that this is what they have grown accustomed to, right?
Abuse is now their safe space. Imagine something like that, And I'm certain a lot of them probably may have come from situations where they were not previously abused. But no, this is all that
they know. Definitely. And this is why we provide the education. We have a counselor who would do sessions with the women, educational sessions. And that in itself is a process because, of course, it takes time to work with these women for them to unlearn and relearn. Yeah. Some of them believe that my partner would have said to me over and over that he loves me. It is just that sometimes, if I don't listen to him or if I doesn't do as he says, he would become angry, not understanding that this partner who may be narcissistic, he may want to control everything about the relationship. You would be in a toxic environment, and because of his narcissistic personality, he would make you feel as though you are the one that is doing wrong. So you are convinced that there's something that I do to cause him to react
the thing about it,
does.
sometimes I think, generally as human beings, we tend to forget that the other person's actions and reactions are their responsibility. You don't become burdened by their decision making. You are a recipient of whatever that decision was, or whatever outcomes as a result of that decision. But it's not innately your choice. It's not innately you volunteering yourself to this, So sometimes we absorb it internally where we should really be assessing it and saying, I didn't choose this path for me.
And this is where we come in to give that support and to let you know that, listen, your partner is responsible for his behavior. You are not responsible. And there are a lot of times, we've heard women say, okay, now that we're talking about it, I realize that I did not do X. He came home and because I didn't make, prepare a meal that he likes, he would have used that as an excuse. Or, we give them examples of abuse and they're like, okay, I experienced that, So because of the education and, us creating the awareness, they now understand that, I am in an abusive relationship. Some of them, it may not take a long period for them to recognize. Some of them, it may take a longer period. It takes time. But we continue to work with them. We continue to provide that support.
Excellent. That is so lovely. I know that Women of Substance, the organization you all operate here in Tobago, is there any mechanisms in case there's someone from Trinidad perhaps that needs access to this? Are you all attached to any other services in Trinidad that may be able to render similar services?
Okay, so we have clients we would have assisted in Trinidad, and we often refer clients to services in Trinidad because, as we know, there are no available safe houses in Tobago at the moment. So what we do is refer persons to Trinidad. That in itself is unrealistic, if I may say, because if we have a situation where a woman has her children attending school in Tobago, or this woman is employed, how do you uproot your children and go to Trinidad?
Yeah, that is such a difficult decision.
It is, and you may have, let us say, you have loans. If you go to a safe house in Trinidad,
you lose your
how
job.
do you continue working?
Yeah,
a lot of organizations do not have domestic violence workplace policies in place. Yeah, so the choice would be to just stay in the situation because they don't have a choice.
So may I ask, have you been advocating with the relevant spaces or organizations? Because I know that you are a warrior in this space, right? What are some of the things that you would like to come to the fore?
Definitely accommodation. We were granted a property by the Tobago House of Assembly, and I am indeed grateful to God, grateful to the THA for that. What we need right now is assistance to draw the plans for our building and funding to construct that building, because we've had the property for a few years now and we need help. We don't have the money to construct that building. So, we need help from corporate Trinidad and Tobago. We need help to construct. We need persons to come on board. We need someone.
So you're looking for labor, you're looking for materials, you're looking for planning, and all of the relevant additions that can make this into a
reality.
Space, into a reality. So viewers, I hope that we have some supportive persons whose hearts is truly in the right place. And this is really a clarion call to assist Ms Mars in her endeavors at this time, because at the end of the day, this will go down to positively develop the island and assist persons who truly need that additional help.
Definitely, because one of the things that worries me a lot is the fact that when women go to the police, let us say the police receives a report at 11 p.m. or 12 midnight or 1 a.m. The police do not have a space where they could house the woman. The police station is not equipped.
So they turn them back out onto the street?
Not that they, no, they don't turn them back.
Yeah.
They reach out to us to try to assist, to make, recommendations or referrals. We are grateful that we are able to refer persons for emergency accommodation. But this emergency accommodation is only 72 hours. We are grateful because at least, we can do a referral. But after 72 hours, 3 days,
it's
the
something
woman
else
needs help.
to kick in.
Definitely.
Okay, I totally get it.
We definitely need help to construct our building so that we can house these women. We receive calls from persons living in Trinidad all the time.
I want to ask a question, and this is really towards some data so we can have an idea. In the short space of time that you've been operating this NPO, how many women have reached out on average?
On average, I would say We would have rendered assistance to over 300 women between Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah.
All right. So at this juncture, I know we have been speaking heavily about the mechanics of the system, but it's of the conversation. I'd just like to find out, what are some of the amazing things that God has allowed you to accomplish with this MP? And I want you to give me your top 3, because I need people to understand that when God is in the mix of something, he doesn't leave you without support. He doesn't leave you without experiences that can allow you to grow and develop. So tell me, what are some of the things that God has done with you during this NPO development?
Okay, so number one is in 2019, I received a national award, gold medal, from the president of Trinidad and Tobago for, work with development of women.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. You all see how God has been moving powerfully?
Yes, so that was in 2019. In 2021, I think during the COVID period, I received an international award for the work that I'm doing. I received that in 2021.
You remember what agency?
Oh my God.
All right.
That is a senior moment right there.
It'll come back.
Oh my God. I do apologize.
That's okay.
In 2023, I was able to travel to Nigeria and launch a segment of our sit and chat with Onika Mars domestic violence support group in Edo State, Benin City. So I collaborated with another organization who works with women and children in Nigeria, and during the 16 days of activism, we did work with women. I was privileged to visit some of the projects that they would have been doing, economic empowerment programs for women, and I was really excited that I was able to launch our sit and chat with Onika Mars.
Over there with that.
Yes.
That is so amazing. That is so amazing. So as we round out, I just want to know the lighter side of Onika, right? So I'd like you to tell me 2 truths and a lie as to some unique things about yourself that we may not necessarily know. And I'll take an opportunity to guess which one is the lie.
I am passionate about serving. I would receive a call at 12 midnight.
So we know that one is the truth. So next one.
My children are my everything after God.
Okay. And I'm waiting for the next one so I can determine which one is the lie. A taxi. I know she can't even think of it.
I don't like traveling.
Oh no, okay, well we know that one is a lie because you told me that earlier and I clocked it. You understand? If you see some of the destination Ms Mars vacations on, well, 2, it's amazing. So I know that the children are her entire heart after Christ. So Ms Mars, it was such a wonderful pleasure having you at the Tenaciously Resolute podcast. We really love to see people making impact in the lives of others. I appreciate your work. I appreciate your service. I appreciate even your tenacious nature and being so resolute in what you do. You're truly a superstar. And from us here at the studio, we really want to wish you the very best. Please give us your handles. Please tell us how we can access to provide support, help, or whatever as we round out.
Okay, thank you so very much, Carice. Thank you all for having me. Thank you for allowing me to share my story. My story is similar to somebody else's story that may be listening at this very present time and moment. We can be reached via our Facebook page, Women of Substance Tobago, our Instagram page, Women of Substance Tobago also. And we also have our email, Women of Substance Tobago at yahoo.com.
Thank you very much, Onika. And guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I bid you a wonderful rest of your week and an amazing experience in the new week ahead. So thank you for tuning in here at the Tenaciously Resolute. We always tell you, stay tenaciously resolute. Take care and bye-bye.